My name is Jim Mohr, and I serve as the chaplain at Westminster College in New Wilmington, Pennsylvania. And a little bit about myself. I got into the chaplaincy thing having absolutely no clue whatsoever what I was getting into. Now, I say that because I didn't go to chaplaincy school. They don't actually offer one, by the way. I served as a pastor in a church for 17 years before going to Westminster. And I was part of a synod task force that was looking at restructuring the Synod of the Trinity. And so one of the things that we did as part of that task force was meet with collegiate ministry programs across the Synod at Westminster College. It's only the third time I'd ever been on the Westminster campus, so I didn't know a whole lot about the campus. I was there chairing this portion looking at collegiate higher education ministry. And as part of that conversation, our group of folks that were interviewing chaplains and students asked the question, if you were to redesign your campus ministry program, what would it look like? And so they gave some answers, and then they flipped that question on us and asked us what we would do with that. And so we answered, and trust me, I hadn't really thought about that answer. 3 years later, I got a call from Westminster College asking if I would come up and talk with them about college ministry. I had no clue why I was doing that, other than I had been part of this format. And by the time it was done, I realized that I actually had gone to a job interview that I hadn't planned on. And then a couple of months later, I got a call to see if I would come and officially interview, and the rest is history. And I have been there 13 years as their college minister, collegiate ministry, college ministry. I stumble on that because I have multiple things that people call me. They call me the chaplain. They call me reverend. They call me pastor. Those are the pretty easy ones. But they also call me coach because I work with the sports teams. They also call me father because sometimes they think I'm Catholic. They just call me everything. They call me doctor. They call me professor. The list just goes on. And so I've just kind of learned to listen to everything. If somebody says something, they might be talking to me, so I say hello. Been there 13 years, much like Shelley, which is kind of interesting that we've both been there that long. I would tell you that my first 4 years or so was all about finding my way, trying to figure out what is this campus thing about. As a matter of fact, I remember sitting in my first president's staff meeting, looking out the window and asking myself, what am I doing here? And suddenly there I am in the midst of that setting. What you see here is kind of an interesting, my title is From the Fringe to the Center and Beyond, and you'll maybe get a sense for that here in a second. Movement from the fringe. When I arrived at Westminster College, my office was on the 3rd floor of Old Main. That is the administration building at Westminster College. I was as far away from anywhere as you could get. As a matter of fact, you couldn't find my office because it was back in a cubbyhole. And if you wanted to get there and you had any mobility issues, it wasn't going to happen. And the only folks that I tended to see up there were the chapel nerds. Those kids who were involved in chapel staff, and occasional other students would come up for some counseling, but for the most part, that was it. I realized that that wasn't a good place for me because there's no one in the world that will look at their ministry or their mission, because I think college ministry is being on the mission field. And you wouldn't want to do that from the fringe or from the boundaries of the campus. You want to do it from the middle. And so, hold on a sec, let me get rid of this guy, if I can. But I was near the college chapel, so that was a good thing. I was on the 2nd floor of the college chapel. So everybody thought this is a good spot. I'm convinced that the previous chaplains, and they only ever had 5, if they all were located up there, they all were academics who loved to write and hide, because you could do both and do it well. Okay, so let's see what happens here. There we go. So that was my view from that office. I could see a parking lot. I could see a building across the way, which happens to be the admissions building. So if I really looked for a while, I could see the new prospective students wandering in and out. I could see their parents as they nervously walked into the building. But for the most part, that was it. I really couldn't see anything. And so I thought, well, I got to do something about this. And so they were remodeling our building. And in the course of remodeling, I did what I often do when I think I should be somewhere where I'm not. I started, throwing out the weather balloons, and it just got more frequent and frequent. And finally, someone bought in and said, boy, we ought to move you downstairs. And so my next office moved me, I keep pushing the wrong button here. They're back. My next office moved me to the second floor of Old Main. And now I was located in the traffic flow of students who had parking tickets. Will paid parking tickets. I don't know if he did or not, but so the only students I would get were those that had the rubber band effect. They went and paid their fine, and now they're walking back down the hall, and they've got tears in their eyes. How do I tell my mom I just had to pay a $500 parking ticket because I made a fake parking pass so I could park on campus? So again, I'm in the administration building. It's easier to find. Looked out the quad. Now I'm next to the chapel entrance, first floor. I can walk in and be in the pulpit within seconds. Great spot, right? There was my view. I looked at the quad. There wasn't anyone there when I took this picture, but I looked at the quad, and I realized as I was looking at the quad one day that every person walking by was part of my mission field. Unlike Shelley, who's surrounding the campus, I'm in the middle of the campus. So each and every person there, be that our students or the custodian or the president, they are part of my mission field. They are part of my ministry. And so as I sat there one day and I was thinking about how things were moving about on campus and how I still was kind of on the fringe because I only ever saw the kids paying their fines, another opportunity opened up. And so I decided I somehow need to get to the middle. I need to get to the student center. And so I made another move, thanks to Patrick Krantz, who is here. Patrick Krantz is a professor at Westminster College, oversees undergraduate research for us in civic engagement. He's an education professor, does a lot of things. But he had an office that was in the student center that was getting ready to move to another location. And so I decided his location was my location. I'm going to get this thing. And so I put the word out again. I started floating those balloons, and I wanted to be in the student center. 90% of the students of the campus walks by this space that I'm in now each week. Opportunities were there to connect with students and faculty every day. Faculty forum meets there on Wednesdays, so I'm out in the hallway saying hello to faculty members, asking them about their research, what they're doing, what's going on in their lives. The issue was that this new office was located behind a solid wall. That's how my wall looked. And I thought, well, this isn't very inviting. How do I get this to open up so that we can connect with folks? And so we did two things. We looked at that. We also looked at the name. The name was the chapel office. And the chapel office connotated what? Church. Only going to have church kids come here and be part of this. So we looked at that for a long time, studied it, and we changed the name from the chapel office to the Office of Faith and Spirituality, which just fits exactly what we were hearing this morning. Faith allows us to still connect with the church kids. Spirituality allows us to connect with the campus because the campus is the mission field. Okay, it doesn't matter, we have a Presbyterian scholarship at Westminster. We're intentional about that. We want to attract Presbyterian students. It's called the Young Presbyterian Scholarship. $18,500 every year for 4 years if you're Presbyterian. It's a great scholarship. But I have to be intentional about not being able to know who's Presbyterian and who's Methodist and who's Lutheran and who's Catholic and who's Muslim. I have to know that. I have to know not who they are. I have to look like this. Okay, my ministry has to be like this. And so we changed the name. Then we had to open up the access to the facility because we realized that it wasn't very inviting to walk behind a wall that you didn't know what was back there. So chances are you weren't going to knock on the door. And you might open the door and come in, but you probably wouldn't. And if the door was open, you might peek in, but you'd be afraid, so you probably wouldn't do that. So we decided to petition for a window in this office, and the window looks like this. And so now we opened up the campus. The campus is invited in, and we're invited out. And so now everyone that walks by, we're sure to wave to. They come in the office. They say hello to us. We connect with them. People say to me, well, do you like living in a fishbowl? Yes. Do you like walking past the fishbowl? Yes. So what's the problem? So we moved to this. And realizing that now my view is of the main place to gather on campus. I'm right in the midst of the campus center. Students will gather in there constantly. So then we decided, okay, let's look at our programming and what we're doing. How can we expand as we reach out to the campus and not just to the kids who have been part of the chapel program? And so we went after some goals and outcomes, extending the chaplaincy programming so that it moved into areas of academic and non-academic student life. And so we've been able to connect some of our programming with our first-year program, doing things like civic engagement. Are you all familiar with the KIVA program? KIVA is a program that allows you to make microloans to people around the world through the KIVA program. And they are, so we have our first year students studying countries around the world, studying situations, and then we give them money to make a loan. So my office is funding academic world to become involved in microloans and learning about everything from budgets and management to service in ways that they didn't imagine. And so my funding for that actually came from the New Wilmington Presbyterian Church, because they want to fund what we're doing and they want to be supportive of that, so they helped us fund this program. And 3 years into the program, it's now self-sufficient. The money just keeps rolling over. So every time we give a loan to you, once you start paying your loan back, it goes back into our fund, and then we just keep rolling that over year after year after year. And now we have about $1,500 every year that is being used to create opportunities for people around the world. So it's really a fun way to have gotten into the academic world. They're engaged in it. They want to come. They want to be a part of it. This year we had, I think there's 18 sections of our first year program, and 16 participated. And so we really have been able to jump in. Collaborating with faculty in first year program, I talked about that. Service learning, Patrick's office does all of our service learning on campus. It might be service learning classes, it might be things that they're doing through my area of the world. And we've been able to do a lot of partnering, collaborating with our faculty on different things. One of my favorite things that just happened is a faculty member came and said, we'd like to do an Oxfam banquet. And y'all familiar with Oxfam? A great hunger education program. And so I said, we'll do this with you, but your class has to take the lead. And so they take the lead, my office supports it, and we had an Oxfam banquet about 3 weeks ago, and it was a wonderful experience. And our Vice President for Academic Affairs was sitting on the floor. She had become part of the poverty world. And so we were able to engage and talk about that with our students, and kind of they experienced poverty. And that led us into a work trip that we just came back from, where we did nothing last week except study poverty. And we started out by trying to define it. What is poverty? And so we were in the poorest county in the state of South Carolina, Georgetown County. And so we talked about poverty. Then we talked about the next night, what's it mean to be poor? And the third night was, is being in poverty and being poor the same thing? And so these students were engaged in hour-long conversations that didn't stop when we finished. They just continued into the night. Trust me, really late one night. And then the next night, we invited an AmeriCorps worker to come and talk to the group, because I wanted to put a face on poverty. It's one thing to learn about something, but it's another to put a face on it. And so the students came in, and this gal had been with us all week, dressed really nice all week, so your impression was that she probably came from a wealthy family, only to discover that she came from poverty, lived in a car with her mom, didn't know her father, and the whole story just went on. And then poverty took a face. It wasn't just this thing we were trying to do in the academic mind. It was, wow, I didn't know. And then others in the group started talking about poverty and what that looks like. And one of our students, a guy who had been a basketball player and he quit, so he's in the midst of a crisis. And so I said to him, why don't you go on this work trip with us? And he said, well, I don't know. And then all of a sudden he shows up and he signs up. And the whole time leading up, I think he is going to bail. He is not going to do this trip. He shows up, which I'm really excited about. And so he keeps saying to me, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why I'm here. So one night in the middle of the night, we're having this conversation about poverty, and he goes, like that. And I'm thinking, oh man, what just happened? And he says, I get it. I get it. I think, and he hesitated, I think, can I say this? I think God brought me here. And he said, I don't come from a family of faith. I experienced faith on this campus through work with the basketball team that I do. I experienced faith through conversations with my friends. And suddenly it just hit him, God brought me here. Could that be real? And so, boy, that's fun when that happens. Vocational discernment, that's a really important thing that comes through the NetVUE grants and the CIC program, because we have a NetVUE grant as well. Well, yours is a Lilly grant. Right. This one is a NetVUE grant, and we have a NetVUE grant for chaplaincy implementation. And vocational discernment is a big part of that. And so I've become engaged in conversations with the academic dean, the dean of the college, and others about what does it mean for us to make vocational discernment, the theology of vocational discernment, if you can imagine that, become part of the curriculum for our students. How does that flow into the mix? And so, religion used to be out there. Suddenly here we are in the midst of making some really important decisions. And, to me, that's the transition that's happened during this time period. It's kind of like my office. It moved from the fringe, moved a little bit closer, boom, now you're in the middle. So what do you do in the middle? Let me jump here. These are some of my views. That's our chapel windows. I just think our chapel's beautiful. Taking students on the roads of Ball. That's the trip I just came back from. Collegiate conference at Montreat for any of you that are looking for something to do. That's a lot of fun. Let me touch real quick, because I got to finish, on our NetVUE grant. Our NetVUE grant is focusing on explorations in faith and spirituality, leadership development, and serving as a way of life. And we're approaching this with a broad spectrum of the entire campus. And so explorations in faith and spirituality are retreats and things like that you would expect. But one of the things we realize is that most students, if they come from a faith tradition, they only know the one they come from. And so we have a program called Wandering Worship. And so we take students out to different styles of worship during the course of the year. And so we go to the synagogue. We meet with the rabbi before the worship experience begins. He shares with us what's going on. He engages the students in the midst of his service. And afterwards, they have a chance to debrief that experience. And so we do that with different faith traditions. And so that's a good one. Leadership development, we're having a campus-wide leadership summit that we've engaged campus leaders from student government, the chapel world, our sports world, our captains of teams are all coming together for a leadership summit. And that really comes out of our office. And serving as a way of life, we have a program that we're creating that we hope to be a pilot program for other schools called Experience Alaska. This summer we are taking 14 students to Alaska where they will have 5 components during 2 weeks that they'll be looking at. Vocational discernment, spiritual development, social awareness, looking at the effects of global warming and sustainable living, and the permafrost and all the things that go with that. They'll be living together, so they'll develop community, and they'll do discernment through that process, but also taking advantage of technology. They're going to do video blogging, and as well as Facebook and Twitter and all those other types of things. And so it should be a ton of fun. We're working with the University of Anchorage, Alaska Anchorage. Our students will be doing undergraduate research with their students, studying dippers. Do y'all know what dippers are? They're birds that dip into the water. And so our students will be capturing birds and taking samples, and they'll also be doing the same thing with salmon. And so, kind of a cool experience that we hope to use as a pilot. And then back to my office window and the campus.